With me, Cynthia Ng. Daily cases go back up, over 20,000 new infections today. And how to safely relax restrictions as more states move into the next phase of recovery. That's coming up. Health experts are urging caution following the relaxation of SOPs for fully vaccinated individuals. As the number of new COVID infections continue to stay elevated, with daily cases back up to over 20,000 today, infectious disease expert Professor Dr. Adiba Kamarulzaman urges the government to relieve the pressure on the healthcare system before allowing more social and economic sectors to open up.
I think once the pressure on the health care, particularly ICU beds, are lessened, those are the indicators where we can start to think of reopening, and enforcement is one thing. Right. Once you reopen, I've just had someone from Perlis complain to me that people are not following SOPs. Now that eating in restaurants are allowed, so I think enforcement is super important. And also we need to put in place a mechanism where we can find and trace and contact trace those people who may have been exposed to someone who's positive, so we can break the chain of transmission as quickly as possible. So I think if one of our weaknesses thus far is and how we got to where we are in terms of the number of cases is perhaps our testing, contact tracing system has not been optimal. I think if alongside with ramping up the vaccine program, if we can quickly put in an effective find, test, trace, isolate system that can isolate people within 24 to 48 hours. I think hopefully we can move forward.
She also highlighted the importance of enhanced testing strategies when dealing with the virus.
We need to have a national testing strategy and possibly, I think Ministry of Health has already talked about or has put in a price cap, for people in the lower income group, well, actually, it's already available. They can walk to any clinic kesihatan, but we need to make those tests even more widely available down to the district level and down to clinic desa, so that people can just have these quick tests, as at little price as possible, or within Ministry of Health settings, it's usually free of charge. So making these tests widely available, but testing alone without the entire support for the patient in terms of if they need to isolate, what are the symptoms they need to look out for and who to call. Ideally, they should be linked to. Well, now we've got a digital, MySejahtera home monitoring support. So again, people need to be aware that this is available. But also, I think apart from a digital app or the MySejahtera home monitoring support, I believe they should also be connected to a general practitioner who they can call.
The government will only recognize a vaccine certificate on the MySejahtera application or the vaccination card issued by the Health Ministry. Deputy Health Minister Dr. Nur Azmi Ghazali said no printed versions of the digital certificate will be accepted.
The Health Ministry said it had detected the sale of vaccination certificates in the form of physical cards being sold for 12 to 15 ringgit on online shopping platforms. A police report has been lodged, said Dr. Nur Azmi, adding that the Health Ministry will take action against the party involved. He stressed that the ministry has never made any procurement to issue vaccination cards and that those wanting to dine in at eateries or cross districts would need to show the digital certificate on MySejahtera or the white vaccination card issued by the Health Ministry.
There are fewer births and more deaths in Malaysia between April to June this year. According to the Department of Statistics, the national birth rate has declined by 4.4% in the second quarter of 2021, while the death rate increased by 10.1% during the same period.
About 111,000 births were recorded in the second quarter this year, compared to some 116,000 births during the same period in 2020. Chief Statistician Datuk Sri Muhammad Uzair Mahidin said it was anticipated earlier that lockdown during COVID-19 would lead to baby boom, but statistics showed otherwise. Meanwhile, over 44,000 deaths were recorded in comparison to the 40,241 deaths during the second quarter of last year. Selangor recorded the highest number of fatalities with 6,818 deaths, which Uzair said was due to COVID-19. He added the pandemic did not significantly impact Malaysia's life expectancy at birth. The life expectancy for a baby born in 2021 on average is expected to live and reach the age of 75.6 years, 1.3 years longer than a decade ago.
The Malaysia My Second Home program has been reactivated with several changes made to the policy. New applications can be submitted beginning October, and this process will be overseen by the Immigration Department. The government had paused new applications for the program last July following the closure of the country's borders.
The government has introduced 9 new conditions for applicants. Among them, participants must be in the country for at least 90 days in a year. They're also required to have offshore income of at least 40,000 ringgit a month compared to 10,000 ringgit previously, and a fixed deposit account with a minimum of 1 million ringgit, where 50% maximum withdrawal is allowed for the purpose of buying property, health and children's education. The age for those eligible to apply has now been placed under 2 categories, namely for those between the age of 35 and 49 and those 50 years and above. According to Home Ministry's Secretary General, Datuk Wan Ahmad Dahlan, this is so that only participants who are financially stable and with permanent employment can apply for the program.
We will go for a quick break. Stay with us.
Check this out.
It hasn't been such a long time since people first started.
Welcome back. Police in Thailand had defended their use of force against protesters as a necessary public safety measure. Bangkok is bracing for more demonstrations to demand the Prime Minister's removal for mismanaging the COVID-19 crisis. Police fired tear gas, water cannon and rubber bullets on protesters on Tuesday. Police Chief Pakapong Pompetra said the measures were necessary to prevent more damage. The protesters, mainly youth, gathered near the residence of Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha to show their anger over an outbreak that has seen record deaths in recent days. Thailand today reported over 21,000 new COVID cases. Authorities in Myanmar currently have no plans to inoculate Rohingya refugees as they begin vaccinating priority groups against COVID-19 in the western Rakhine state. As Bangladesh kicked off its vaccination program for the group, Rohingyas who remained in Myanmar complained of discrimination and mistreatment.
Reuters reported that vaccine rollout had begun in the town of Sittwe with 10,000 vaccinations for the elderly, healthcare workers, government staff, and monks. Local administrators said there were no current plans for vaccinating Rohingyas living in camps in Sittwe, capital of Rakhine State. Up to 500,000 Rohingya remain in villages elsewhere in Rakhine. Some Rohingya villages had been vaccinated, but authorities are now facing vaccine shortages. Meanwhile, for more than 1 million Rohingya who have fled Rakhine for Bangladesh, vaccinations have started this week with over 65,000 Rohingya refugees to be vaccinated in the first stage of the campaign.
Germany will no longer offer free COVID-19 tests for unvaccinated people in an effort to encourage people to get vaccinated. Germans will have to start paying for their own tests starting mid-October.
Free testing will be offered only to those who cannot get the vaccine because of health conditions, as well as to pregnant women, children and people under the age of 18. Chancellor Angela Merkel said more than half of Germany's population is fully immunized, but the speed of vaccination has declined significantly in recent weeks. Germany is facing a rise in new infections. Merkel said proof of vaccination, recovery or negative tests may soon be required for visiting enclosed places like hospitals and restaurants. In most states, testing is required to attend large-scale business, culture, social and/or sports events.
The travel recovery has started, says Britain's Heathrow Airport. Passenger numbers last month surged by 74% compared to the same time last year, the busiest it has been since the pandemic started. But overall numbers were still down 80% on pre-pandemic levels.
Last month, over 1.5 million travelers passed through Heathrow, making it the busiest month since March 2020, just before COVID-19 lockdowns began in Europe. Heathrow credited the uplift to the UK government's decision to allow fully vaccinated Britons to travel to medium-risk countries without needing to quarantine on return. Britain has since early August opened its borders to immunize people from the US and European Union. However, US has yet to lift its restrictions on travelers from the UK.
Taliban insurgents are making rapid advances across Afghanistan as US and other foreign troops begin to withdraw from the country. About 65% of Afghanistan has now fallen to the hands of the Taliban. The speed of the advance has shocked the government, and in some places, government forces have given up without a fight. The Taliban are battling to defeat the government backed by the US and to reimpose strict Islamic law. President Joe Biden urged Afghan leaders to fight for their nation, saying that he did not regret his decision to withdraw. The US has spent more than $1 trillion over 20 years and lost thousands of troops. Taliban forces have captured 8 out of 34 provincial capitals in less than a week, including Kunduz, one of the country's largest cities. Tens of thousands of people have fled their homes in northern Afghanistan to escape battles that have overwhelmed their towns and villages as government forces try to fend off rapidly advancing Taliban forces. Attempted suicide remains a crime in Malaysia, despite calls for it to be seen as a mental illness. Tonight on Consider This, we take a closer look at the legal and cultural barriers to decriminalization. That's coming up. And that is all we have for you on AWANI tonight. Get the latest news updates on COVID-19 and COVID-19 vaccines from astroawani.com and Astro AWANI app. I'm Cynthia Ng. We'll see you again tomorrow.